Awesome. So hello everyone. Thank you for coming to the April, not yet May, April webinar for ASCILITE. So to get us started, let's do an acknowledgement of the country. We acknowledge that the traditional custodians of all the lands on which we meet and pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And so today we have a retention team from Charles Sturt University to talk to us about developing a holistic university retention program. Developing a holistic university retention program. Over to you.
Awesome. Sorry. Great. Thanks, Kwong. Awesome. So thank you so much for everyone for waiting out through the waiting room. Obviously, not an ideal start, but we'll make sure that
has built, Kelly. The suspense has built.
We'll make sure we shorten our presentation a little bit to finish on time. So Nelia, just the next slide, please. So today we'll put the Charles Sturt retention team here. Myself, I'm the Subdean Student Retention. After my short presentation, Noelia Roman will be presenting, followed by Neil van der Ploeg, and then Sarah Teakle, arguably most dedicated team member who's making a cameo appearance from maternity leave. So thanks for popping in today, Sarah. Other members of the team, Wendy Rose, won't be presenting today, and Ben Hicks, our Learning Analytics lead, has recently taken a really exciting role at another institution. And so we'll be looking for a new Learning Analytics lead. So if you are interested or know of anyone who's interested, Noelia, can you click, please? Please email retentionteam@csu.edu.au. Awesome, thanks, Noelia. So this slide just provides a brief history of the retention team. So our work started as a small pilot back in 2017. We worked across approximately 20 subjects or units of study and identified approximately 150 students pre-census who appeared to be disengaged. We learned a lot from that and slightly expanded in 2018, working across 25 subjects and found a few more quite disengaged students pre-census, and we're able to get some really nice results by contacting these students and providing targeted support. We reduce the number of students receiving a 0 fail grade and increase subject progress rates by approximately 10%. That was also the first year I attended the ASCILITE conference, and I've been every year since then. So that was my little taste of ASCILITE.
Was it Singapore, Kelly? I think I remember.
No, that was 2019, Neil. 2018 was Geelong, which was still very, very fun and beautiful location. Singapore was a highlight though. So in 2019, from the nice results that we received in the Faculty of Science pilot, we received funding to expand across the 3 faculties at Charles Sturt. So expanded quite a lot from 25 subjects to almost 200. And then we've continued to expand since. And in 2021, we incorporated the Embedded Tutors program, which Sarah will talk about today. And we haven't got our projected 2023 numbers here, but the circle will be quite a bit bigger again. We've included more postgraduate subjects, and the Embedded Tutors program has incorporated quite a few more subjects also. Right, thanks, Noelia. So over the last 6 years, we've developed all of the strategies that have worked, everything we sort of pilot, test before we expand, and we've been able to put them all into this retention model. So one of the key first steps is identification of key commencing subjects. So we do some analysis to find subjects that have a high proportion of commencing students, and by doing this, we're able to monitor the engagement of approximately 80% of all commencing students across the university. We work with the subject coordinators of these key subjects with professional development and also embedding best practice transition pedagogy, and Noelia is going to talk about this part. As we move through the semester, we then monitor our early assessment item submission across these subjects, and students who do not submit receive targeted outreach support.
Don't spoil it, Kelly.
And Neil will be talking about this part. Oh, there's a lot more interesting stuff, so please stay on the line. If students submit the early assessment item but fail, or fail later assessment items, they receive targeted contact and encouragement to book with an embedded tutor. And Sarah will be talking more about this at the end. All right, over to you, Noelia.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to be talking about Teaching First. And Teaching First came about after a few iterations of the retention team model, in that they noticed that a lot of the key subjects that we were looking at with commencing students ended up having sessional staff teaching these transition subjects. And we could see from the data that what we needed was to make sure, and from literature, that embedding best practice transition pedagogy into these commencing subjects is key. But to be able to do that, we needed to make sure that staff understood the difference between a commencing subject and like a later on subject, a more targeted or more focused subject for a course. So we put together the Teaching First program. We could see that in normal standard professional development programs that were available across the university, that sessional staff weren't always invited. So we started at that point. When they were run, they weren't necessarily focused on what sessional staff knew or what sessional staff needed to know to be able to run these subjects efficiently and give the students the support they needed to be able to transition to tertiary study efficiently. And a lot of the PDs that we have at Charles Sturt, and I know talking to other providers and other members from other universities, that we generally talk about our own university, and we talk about our courses or subjects, as we call them at Charles Sturt, our sessions, and we have a lot of these three-letter acronyms that sessional staff don't necessarily understand or know what we're talking about. So we started looking at exactly what we needed, and we saw that there was a clear need for this development program looking at first-time teaching first year, or staff that have never taught online, because we do a lot of our online a lot of our teaching at Charles Sturt online. What does the program involve? Just really quickly, these are 6 90-minute professional development sessions that are completely run online. Staff are given the opportunity to complete pre and post-session activities. So this is looking at the different platforms that we use to teach on, how to integrate literature, and for us, importantly, learning analytics data, and how to improve the subject delivery and content resources for the students that are actually within that actual offering. Staff were also given the option to meet with an educational designer, so to improve their LMS and how they deliver the site, and also with academic skills library services. A bit of a sweetener for sessional staff, because a lot of them we know are often in that sort of transition to try and get a continuing role in the sector. We offered a peer review for those staff members so that they could look at their teaching style, and we could help them along. And so if they had interviews, they could talk about that review process. Key to the program working was that all these hours were paid for our sessional staff. So we don't have time to go into all parts of the program, but I'm going to talk about some of the session details and some of the highlights. And what we really wanted to do at this point was show what our LMS could do and show what they could offer as staff to the students without using too much of their own time that was allocated for teaching, to be able to modify their own LMS sites. So we decided to run the program via our LMS, just like you would a normal subject, and we set it up in a way that the sessional staff could then go in and easily replicate what we were doing in their own site. So starting to showcase the technology that was available by showing that teaching practice. So session 1 was, what is it to teach? And we spoke about, as sessional staff, how they what they thought of teaching, how they could implement their own knowledge, and because they are somewhat they are content specialists, how they could embed that into foundational subjects. The feedback was really overwhelming for session 1. We had a great mixture of sessional staff that had worked for many years as sessionals. We had some new sessional staff. We had staff that were new to university teaching, and so we were able to work as a small community of teachers and see how we could implement these different ideas into their own subjects. Session 2, we then started bringing in the learning analytics component and the data that is available to staff for the sessional staff. So really importantly, sessional staff sometimes don't know where to access information or where to access data. And by going through a session to show them how important and how we can use this data to improve things such as retention was really key to the teaching practices. So we went through the different Charles Sturt systems. We navigated with the sessionals how to request access to the online platforms and how to use what we have developed as a team, which is the cohort, or now the subject snapshots, to be able to apply to their teaching. So and I'll give you a bit of background on the snapshots very quickly. As Kelly and the retention team went through every session, they noticed that staff had more and more trouble accessing specific data that would support their development of subjects, resources, LMS. And so over the years, we started putting together a document, and it started off as a PDF, eventually went to some HTMLs that we would share specifically with people. And now we have a live dashboard that brings in and feeds in data from different areas and puts it in a nice, neat package so that staff know exactly where to obtain that data to be able to apply it. So very quickly, what do these snapshots contain, and how did we present it in these professional development series for staff to apply? So the demographics of the course, really important, because at Charles Sturt we have a really unique set of students. So 85 to 86% of our students belong to at least one or more equity groups. So really important for them to understand that if you have a high number of regional, rural, remote students, that you probably wouldn't have all your activities that can only be done online, because a lot of our students would have to drive out maybe an hour or more to be able to have internet access. The age, so if you have an age group that's much higher, then you probably would need to explain some technology pieces or look at your assessments and how your assessments are delivered and submitted. So different areas of the demographics. Some of these are really easy to find, but again, some of them are quite hard to get just the content for that subject. They also contain the course enrolment, so understanding the different range of courses that are enrolled in your subjects. Specifically in your first year when you're teaching sort of those foundational subjects, you'll have a range of students. So making sure that they understand that you need to embed maybe topics or questions or focus different times in tutorials for those specific courses. So making sure that everyone has an idea of how that content fits in their profession. We included students with prior subject attempts, because otherwise you would have to go into each individual student's background to see whether they'd attempted the subject previously. This gives the staff an idea of how to approach students, how to talk to them, how to maybe follow up with them after the first few weeks, or give them a bit of guidance, because we know that not all fail types or previous attempts with a student that has failed is the same. So making sure that those students understand and feel that you want to support them in their success for the subject. Okay, the other thing that was that we included in the snapshots was the history or the previous history of the past 3 years of progress rate within the subject against the university average, as well as the grade distribution. So they can, as sessional staff, they won't necessarily have access to previous LMS sites, and so student grades. And so this was a way of them having a very quick idea of how the grades have progressed over time of the previous 3 years. And the last thing we included was the activity on the LMS. So 2 weeks prior to session starting, all the way up to week 6. We included this for a number of reasons, and we spoke to the staff about it, and it was to make staff aware that when our LMS opens, it's really important to have engaging material, to have clear announcements, and to make sure that there's a way of students contacting staff, because students are logging in, you know, as soon as those sites are available. If you don't have anything there, we showed them that in some subjects where there wasn't necessarily something there, the engagement sort of takes quite a long time to build up then with the LMS as well. So we included that for them to also have a look and observe how that student pattern occurs throughout the LMS for the first 6 weeks. Again, staff found that that session really help them develop and maybe look at where things are being presented and how to present content, the same content maybe in different ways. We went through with the sessionals, how to access really key platforms. So for example, the platform that gives staff the student details, phone numbers and emails, because you have to apply or request that access. So those sorts of things were central to that session. I'll skip a couple of sessions where we spoke about assessment design and link that in with some of those demographics and content within the subject snapshot. One of our key sessions is making sure that sessional staff understand the student support that's available, how they can send students to those support services, and how they can link those support services or embed content into their own subjects. So having an open, really organic discussion with those services. And so we brought in academic skills, library, accessibility and inclusion, and our First Nation services. This session and the panel discussion that we had was the highlight when we surveyed the participants across the 3 sessions, was actually the highlight session. So they were able to get one-on-one meetings with these services. They were able to embed resources prior to sessions, even, you know, prior to assessments even running. So just understanding the level of support and the different things that those services can do was really key for them. The last one is we wanted to make sure that the sessionals, that the staff that were participating in these development understood that once we teach, it's also really important that we know the systems and that you're going to have to do to be able to sort of close the loop within your teaching. So if they weren't going to be the sessional staff or the staff member teaching it for the following offering, that they were able to put enough information under the feedback and reflection and moderation of that subject for the next person that picks up the subject to be able to make those improvements. And also how to use the student feedback and how to, the student feedback platform, how to take that feedback on and what to sort of feed forward for the following academic that will pick up the subject. The final feedback that we got for this series and across all the platforms that we taught the sessional academics and all the participants was really overwhelmingly positive. We've since run this professional development 4 times, and we had a session off, and in that session off we were asked, you know, over and over again if we could, like when we were running it again. And so we started running it again this session, and it has been very successful to the work that we do to be able to embed these practices to ensure that students have what they need for that success, and hopefully long-term improve retention. It helps us also with the communication piece that we use, that Neil's going to talk about in the next section, with our sessionals and our academic staff. So over to you, Neil.
Oh, thanks, Noelia. Just going to start my clock. I'll try and give you a little bit of time, Sarah. I'm a bit notorious for going over time, so I'll try to, I'll try to be prompt here. So students who leave the university have a variety of engagement in the subjects and also success in their subjects. So on the one side, we've got students who they're doing very well. They're passing all of their subjects and they may leave. They may do something else. They may go to another university, but that's in some ways not a terrible outcome because the students are at least getting something out of it. But then we have students who may be passing some subjects, failing other subjects. We've got students who are failing all of their subjects, but maybe they're still submitting assessment items. But then we've got these ghost students who not only are they failing all of their subjects or a lot of their subjects, but they're not actually submitting any of their assessment items. And we think that this is actually, we think it's then students are not getting much out of their university experience. They're not submitting anything. They're probably not getting anything out of it. But importantly, they're still paying for it. And that's been really sort of topical at the moment. They're still accumulating that HECS debt, which can skyrocket when inflation is going up. So we think not all fails are equal. And this just shows, I'll just really quickly go over this, but basically the take home of this graph here is that over 3 years, a lot of our domestic undergraduate students, when they're failing, a lot of them are failing through this zero fail. And it's important to note that this isn't just a Charles Sturt specific thing. We haven't seen heaps of data from lots of other unis, but it seems like whenever we see this type of data, whenever it's shared, it seems like it's certainly like common across the sector. And it's probably a result of the whole sort of educational and financial system that we've got. So what are we doing about it? We do have some things. So the pre-census campaign is one of our big pieces of work, and it involves some of what Noelia was just presenting on is part of that, these first 2 hexagons there. So we're working with these key subjects where most of our commencing students are enrolling into. We're working with them to try and make them better subjects, better prepared teaching staff, and hopefully one of the main goals is that we can get more students engaging. But we're also communicating with these students, and we're also helping make sure that before that census date, they're getting supported to make wise decisions about their entire enrollment. And we've got another thing that I'll really quickly go about, which happens immediately after census, which sort of further follows on from this. So the first outreach campaign that we do is a very simple one, and it happens in week 2. And this is just an email that's sent that uses data from the LMS. So if students haven't logged into subjects, we're emailing them, we're trying to get them to engage, we're giving them links to support services. So if we just go forward, won't spend too much time here, but basically students log on, and quite a few of those students don't log on, and they withdraw prior to census. Not a terrible thing. Much better than just getting staying in the subjects and receiving 0 fails and a HECS debt. So keep going, Noelia. We'll make some time back here. So one of the most significant and sort of meatier parts of this pre-census campaign is the outreach that we do in weeks 3 and 4. And as Kelly sort of mentioned earlier, this is largely based off non-submission of early assessment items. And to give you an idea, it involves roughly 1,500 to 2,000 students. We're SMSing them, we're calling them multiple times if we have to, and we're really investing in trying to sort of get in touch with these students to make sure that we help them prior to census date. Next slide, please, Noelia. So using early assessment item is good because it's a stronger level of engagement. A student might be on the LMS, they might be, clicking around, but they're not actually doing something that gets them towards the finish line. They're not actually moving, that much further. They're not getting marks. So we use assessment of or non-submission of assessment items to identify students, because all students who receive 0 fails, if there's an assessment item prior to census, they will have missed it. But quite a few of these students who get 0 fails, they may have been clicking around. So it's a more sensitive measure of selecting students. The problem with using non-submission of assessment items is that hundreds and a decent percentage of students, if you just look at the data of who's submitted and who hasn't, lots of those students have got extensions. And it's important that we don't contact those students and say, hey, it looks like you've missed an assessment item, because they're in their first session. They're probably quite nervous. They think they've got an extension, then they're getting contacted. It's a mess. So we want to make sure that we know who has got an extension. And at Charles Sturt, we don't have a central way of seeing that in a really reliable way. So we've developed this web-based app that you can see a bit of a sample of here to try and make sure that we're contacting the right students and we're not contacting students with extensions. And it's also more efficient. Like, we don't want to be contacting students because there's so many to contact. It's a fairly large campaign. So we can see here that this is what we send to our academics. So we've got 3 students who have been selected. So we're looking at submission data. We're pre-ticking the form to make it quicker for academics. And we're saying, hey, we think these students haven't submitted. Can you help us refine the list? And also, have you got any other information that's going to be helpful for our outreach team when they're speaking with students? So next slide, Noelia. So once the academics get emailed this form, we can see that down the bottom there, Ronald Weasley, he has submitted, well, he's got an extension. So he's been unticked by the academic. So he's not going to get called anymore. We can also add students. So Neville Longbottom, he submitted something. So the data looked like he was okay, but it turns out he submitted an assignment for a different subject and he hasn't actually completed the assessment that we want him to submit. So we can add a note there. So you can see there's an individual note for Neville from the academic saying what's happened. So when the outreach team call Neville, they can explain that. And we also have, and we've also got a little comment about Harry Potter there. I don't know how helpful it'll be, but good context to know. And we've also got a class level sort of space there where academics can make notes on the class level thing. So it actually helps the outreach team know what to say. So if they've missed a test, can they still do the test? When can they do it? That sort of important information. Next slide, please, Noelia. So once we get that information from the outreach team, we provide as much context as we can to make the calls student-centered so that the outreach team can get an idea of what situation the student's in and can help guide them towards the best possible situation. So you can see we've got the subject that they've missed the assessment in, the value of it, the due date, the recency of the data. So if they have submitted, they'll know that, okay, well, we only knew as of sort of 2 days ago. So, that's fine. We've got LMS access data there in the green. We've got the comments from the academics at the student level and the subject level, and also other things that we just know about the subject, such as the embedded tutors being available. So and this is something the outreach team are making the calls quite quickly. So it gives this information to them in a really quick sort of efficient manner. And you can see here that the first 2 students, there's a very big difference between what is the information and the context around it. One student hasn't accessed the site at all. They haven't been to any tutorials. So the support, the phone call is going to be different for that student from the student above. It's not just these students are at risk, please help them. We're trying to give the outreach team more than that. Okay. What we're also doing is getting the outreach team to collect the data So they're filling out forms for us and we're getting data collection. And then we're automatically generating these reports that can get fed back to the academics. So the academics, in a matter of days, once the calls are finished, they can get a bit of a summary of what's happened. Have the students submitted? Have they withdrawn from the subject? Did they speak with the outreach team? Really just keeping them in the loop. And this is something that we're able to generate rapidly and automated through developing a bunch of programming scripts in R. And I should say the context above that we're providing, it can also be done very rapidly as well. It can happen basically as quick as, academic submits within 15 minutes. We can have that context. Outreach team could have the list of students and they're making the calls. And that's a really tricky challenge in this area. And we've the feedback that goes to the academics is also can be more detailed as well. So if we've got more detailed information, we'll pass that on as well. Next slide. Okay. So here on the left, we've got these in orange, we've got the students who we're not contacting. And then we can see here that the students who we are contacting through non-submission, the grade distribution is very different. So Noelia, if you can just reveal. So as we can see, we've got those with dialogue in blue, better grade distribution than those with no dialogue, but still at more risk than the students who are engaged. But it looks like the dialogue, if we can get the dialogue with the students and contact them, they're making better decisions about their enrollment, especially when you look at that zero fail. When we don't have the dialogue, there are lots more students going through to get the zero fails. Next slide. So we're helping students, and it looks like more and more this pre-census campaign, it's helping students make better decisions before that important census date. So hopefully less of those students are going to be sort of, finishing up with this debt that they really didn't get anything for. Now, just really quickly, have I got much? How much time have I got? Not much. So just next slide. So we're also following on from that. And for the students who look like they're at real risk, about 150 to 200, we're flipping the default pathway for these students. So if you just go next slide, Noelia. So the really risky students, if we don't hear from them, if they don't engage, then they're going to be deferred or get put on a leave of absence. And then if they want to continue, they have to actively do something. And this is another smaller campaign, but even more intensive that we do immediately after census. But importantly, it's backdated to census. So this is like the final chance to sort of really reduce these zero fails further. On to you, Sarah.
Perfect. Thanks, Neil. So I'm Sarah, and I've been managing the embedded tutor part of the retention work that the team does. So Noelia, go to the next slide. So that sits when the students start the session and they start submitting their assessment items for a number of significant written assessments. They can meet with a tutor and they get one-on-one feedback. Next slide. Okay, so what we're looking at is where this sits in the larger retention picture is that a number of students are submitting all their assessment items and they're still just not quite hitting the mark. So our hypothesis is that they may be just lacking the academic skills to get them over the line. And if they do get a failing grade in their first session of study, they're not as likely to return to study for the following session. So the aim of the embedded tutors is to provide timely subject-specific support for first-year students in key undergraduate subjects. So the one-on-one support is offered to students in preparing one assessment items. They get draft assessment feedback or feed forward, and the assessments generally have a value between 15 and 60%. The students meet with a tutor online, so over Zoom, and they make their bookings for a tutor session using Calendly. So it's an online scheduling tool, and this is embedded into the subject learning site for students to be able to see. The program is promoted through announcements by the subject coordinators, as well as on the subject site. And again, as Neil said, by our outreach team as well, who can let the students know that is available in their subject. The tutors themselves are often sessional academics or content experts that are often recruited by the subject coordinators. And then they receive some training through the program just on the use of Calendly, Zoom, referring students to other appropriate support services at the university. And more recently, our training for the tutors has moved more towards focusing on teaching pedagogy and approaches to supporting students' collaboration within the team of tutors to create a sense of community. And the tutors often also meet with the subject coordinator to discuss specifics about the assessments before they meet with students. Next slide. So this is what the students can see on their subject site. So they will see some information about the program, about which assessments they can meet with a tutor for and how that runs, the session lengths, things like this. They see some information about other support services at the university that they might want to access before booking a tutor session. And then something else we've added is just a little tutor profile. This makes our tutors friendly and approachable, so we can see Hector here. And one other thing that does is we've seen a decreased number of students just not showing up to their tutor sessions after they've booked them, because essentially they can see that they might be holding up Hector. Next slide. And so underneath that, they can see this kind of booking system, and it's very similar to booking an online doctor's appointment, which we're all pretty familiar with now. They can select a day and a time, put in their email and any other information that they might want to about their assessment for the tutor to see. The tutor gets sent a confirmation email with a link to the Zoom room, as does the student. It's really quite easy for them to then just meet at that time. They can add it to their calendar, and students can choose their tutor on the page as well, which means that they can choose the same tutor for multiple assessments, which allows for continuity of support. Slide. So we have done a data analysis on about 7,500 students who were enrolled in a number of first-year undergraduate subjects over 4 sessions. And of the 1,310 students who met with a tutor at least once, we see a significant shift to the right in the grade distribution of those students, compared with the around 7,000 students who never met with a tutor. So the students who meet with a tutor, they get less 0 fail grades, so they are submitting their assessments, less fail grades and less pass grades, and we see more credits, distinctions and high distinction grades for the students who have met with a tutor. On average, the students who meet with a tutor get a mark around 8% higher than the students who do not meet with a tutor. So providing this support to students has the greatest potential for impact in the first year for our commencing students, and approximately 70% of students who have met with a tutor that we've looked at are commencing students. If we look at the equity group data for the subjects with an embedded tutor, we can see that students from equity backgrounds are likely to access the tutor support, including First in Family, First Nations, and students living with a disability. And in addition to this, there's a high proportion of students enrolled in the undergraduate subjects from regional, rural, and remote backgrounds. So this results in a significant number of students from that background as well having access to tutor support. So essentially, this is just another way of showing that without targeting any specific individuals, that it's supporting the students that really need that. Next slide. So again, we've received some really fantastic feedback on the program from the subject coordinators, from the tutors themselves, and the students that have received the support from the tutors. So approximately 300 students have responded to a survey to rate their experience and to provide feedback in open text comment. The feedback from the students was overwhelmingly positive, with 78% of students rating the tutor sessions as extremely helpful. Next slide. Some of the other questions that we've asked our tutors and students in the feedback surveys are around how they found the booking system. Interestingly, the tutors were the only ones that really ran into problems with the booking system, and the students found it overwhelmingly easy to use. Again, quite interestingly, our tutors never think that the sessions are long enough, that they can't tell the students enough things in that just 20 to 30 minute session, whereas the students have indicated that they think that that's a really appropriate amount of time to meet with the tutor regarding an assessment. The tutors and students both agreed that they saw a perceived increase in their confidence after meeting with a tutor, and that it's really important that the tutor has subject-specific knowledge. But the tutors were less likely to agree that the tutor sessions help the students identify priorities in their learning, which is quite interesting. The next slide, Noelia. Okay, so I think that we have a Twitter page, so if you wanted to go and check that out, you can follow us. Obviously not with the Twitter lingo. Neil, thank you. Yep. Kelly, back to you.
All right, thanks so much, Sarah, Noelia, and Neil. And yeah, we've got 5 minutes remaining, so we'll open it up for questions if there are any additional questions.
There's one on the chat. Do you also run PASS, Peer Assisted Support Scheme?
We don't currently at scale. We did previously, and we actually didn't see a significant increase in subject progress rates. We saw it in certain subjects, it was incredibly successful, and in other areas it was less successful. And maybe one area of embedded tutors that we have sort of explored is using is employing students as student tutors in some subjects. And it's worked to a certain extent, but we've been able to find some really good tutors who are sessional staff who are very familiar with the assessment. So we've mostly gone down that pathway.
Oh, any other questions or feedback from the audience? While waiting, I have one question though, just because this morning I had a meeting about student retention as well. So what is the motivation for this project? Is it because you have done the benchmarking with other institutions to compare the student retention rate, or yeah,
so we're a large regional university, so I think it's less than 15% of our students belong to no equity groups, so it's more common for our students to belong to 1 or 2 equity groups than no equity groups, and we've still got, I think, we've still got a very, very high proportion of students who are members of 3 equity groups, and that's mostly rural, regional, or remote, first in family, and low SES. And so when we look at retention rates across the sector, Charles Sturt University sits quite low. We've also got a very high proportion of online and part-time students, which they're all risk factors. So I think it's really important for Charles Sturt to be able to be very proactive in this space. And so we've seen the latest data that we have, we're working on a report at the moment that we've got the highest commencing progress and first year attrition that the university's seen in a very, very long time currently. So we have been able to really impact those metrics.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you, Kelly. And I think there's 2 more questions on the chat before we can.
I can see Jemima.
The first one.
Yeah, Jemima's asking about the people who are making the calls to students. And at Charles Sturt, it's generally students. So they're current students who receive training, and they're calling students for lots of different campaigns. and our campaign is just one of them. So they're current students or occasionally students who have just really recently graduated. But yeah, it's students, which we find is also an interesting, it's different from someone making a staff who's just a professional. Students often open up when they hear that, oh, you're just a student like me. They share a lot. Sometimes they share more than you expect.
Good. Thank you, Neil. Last question: how many sessional staff do you put through your training program each year or each round?
Each session. So we run it, we've been running it once a session. So we try and start the program a few weeks before the session starts, obviously to try and make sure that sessional staff are comfortable with the different platforms. And also we have about anywhere between 20 to I think the highest we had was about 40, just over 40. Not all our staff can attend the sessions live. So and that's okay, because that's how we teach at Charles Sturt. So we embed a lot of that interactive sort of material within it. So all up, we're up to close to around 200 sessional staff, not counting continuing staff.
Yeah.
So it's quite new.
Quite new. Yeah, thank you, Noelia. And the very, very last question is a long one from Tess. A lot of the embedded tutor sessions taken by students who are already high achieving, and how would you avoid them taking out all sessions if your focus is more on the students that are failing their course?
Question.
Right, Sarah, would you like to answer this one, or would you like me to?
Yeah, I can answer this one. So we actually have looked into this. So we found that the students that on average had been meeting with a tutor did equally as well as the other students who never met with a tutor in their initial assessment. So they weren't necessarily high achieving students. And then they were actually consistently doing better in their subsequent assessment items after meeting with a tutor as well. In addition to that, we actually also have a bit of a campaign where we are contacting students that have failed a previous assessment item, have failed that subject before, or are for some other reason at risk of failing the subject, and encouraging them to book with a tutor as well.
Oh, cool. Well, I don't mind to have the very, very last question. Have you or are you planning on doing any research on whether the embedded tutor program helps students to learn and transition that to future courses rather than teaching them to pass the assessment?
Absolutely. So we're still fairly early days, but we would absolutely love to track those students that have met with a tutor and see how that affects overall progress rates and student retention in the future.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Any final comments from the team?
Thank you so much for attending today, and thanks for inviting us to present.
No problem. No,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Thank
And thank you very much, everyone. And apologies again for the technical issue, but I think we managed to do it well. And it's a very, very timely project. And thank you for accepting the invitation to do this webinar.
And feel free to reach out if you have other questions as well. Yeah, about any of the programs we run. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you do have your own Twitter, so that's great. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you next time in the next webinar. Bye.
Thanks.
everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.